Hey everyone, this is Brian from Motive Training, and today we're going to go over some hip and knee work that's going to help you get better at cycling for the Gears and Cheers event. Danielle is going to demonstrate. We're going to go through hip internal rotation, external rotation, hip flexion, and then we're going to throw some stuff in there for the knee at the very end. So the first thing we're going to do is have you facing forward on your side. You're going to make sure you're in a nice straight line so that your hips aren't twisted and that your hips are stacked in line with your knees and your shoulders. You can use a yoga block or anything that you have at home to kind of squeeze the knees together. Danielle's got a yoga block here, and I want you to start by not aggressively, but creating body tension and squeezing the block in between the knees. The goal here is we're going to work the top side of the hip, so she's going to try to lift that foot toward the sky, rotating internally inside that hip, holding it there 3 to 5 seconds, and then bringing it back down. Again, you're trying to lift as high as you can, get the outside of that hip to work, and then bring it back down nice and slow. If you go really fast and you kick it up really high, you might notice that it will shift your whole hip forward. That's not the goal. We're not trying to get everything to dump in the pelvis. We're trying to get deep inside that hip. So work it nice and slow, high as you can go without actually shifting your weight forward. Next up, we got external rotation. So what you'll do is you'll kick the bottom leg to around 90 degrees, and you'll keep that foot or that shin angle with your femur at 90 degrees. So you're not bending it like here, you're actually going to keep it at 90 through the whole leg. And Danielle's goal is going to be to push the knee into the floor. In this case, her leg's kind of floating off the mat. So if you can do this on a flat floor or a flat surface, it'll work better. But you're going to glue the upper thigh to the floor. And the goal is going to be to externally rotate the hip or bring that foot up as high as it can go. If you notice that your leg is lifting off the mat, that's because you're doing a completely different movement and you're not working the external rotators of the hip. So try to keep the knee actually glued down. Danielle has a lot of external rotation, so she's able to move a lot. To challenge this more, you would set Danielle's foot a little bit higher and work toward that end range. So essentially setting something up here and having her work from this position all the way up. So she's going to feel a lot more tension in that hip that way instead of working through this big range of motion. Down here, it's very easy for her. At the top, it's more challenging. So you can kind of set an object or your kid down at that lowest angle to get a little bit more range if you have a lot of external rotation. If you don't have a lot, you probably won't need to move nearly as much. Try to pay attention to your hips again, just like you did with internal rotation. Don't dump your pelvis around. Keep everything locked in and straight. And if you need to, create some body tension. You can engage your core, you can make fists. Try to isolate the tissue in your hip so you're working just the hip. You're not trying to work the knee, you're not trying to work the foot. Notice how Danielle's foot is actually curling up. You're trying to avoid those types of things. That's taking away tension from the hip. So we want to load that tissue directly on the outside or the posterior capsule of the hip, and the only way to do that is to try to isolate it. Next up, we're going to do hip flexion. So we're going to pull Danielle's leg to around 90 degrees with a bent knee. And if you can't get to this position, you should probably come see us, but if you can, good. If you have pinchiness in the hips, maybe back it down a little bit so it's not as pinchy. The goal being, if you can't get to 90 with pinchy hips, you probably shouldn't be on a bicycle, but that's another story, and you should probably reach out to us. In the meantime, if you can do this, great. So I want you to get it to 90 degrees, and what you're going to do is make sure, again, that you're not moving your pelvis around too much. You're not trying to rotate at the hips. We're trying to isolate the tissue on the front side. So what I want you to do is engage your core a little bit, create some body tension, and from here, Danielle is going to pull in a straight line, straight up as far as she can, getting that front side hip to fire. And as much as she can pull in. Now, if she pulls a lot and her knee kicks out to the side or her foot shoots out, you're incorporating other movements of the hip. So that's external rotation, or some people might actually internally rotate. That's not necessarily direct flexion. So if you think about this as being on a bicycle, we're in a linear path here. We're in a straight line. You're not trying to kick the knee out to the side while you cycle. We did an internal external rotation to get some rotational capacity in the hip, but on the bicycle, I don't expect you to be doing something like this. So as you go through this hip flexion exercise, try to keep that knee in a nice straight line up and down. And just like everything we've done so far, you're trying to do 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 second holds, really getting that tissue to fire in the end range where you're not spending as much time. Next up, we're going to do hip flexion with knee extension. So what you're going to do is you're going to bend that knee around 90 degrees. Again, same thing. Now, if this is really hard for you to do, you'll see as this gets more challenging, you can always bring the knee further down, or if you're really good at this, you can always bring the knee closer to you. It really depends on how much hip flexion and knee extension you have at the same time. This is going to involve a lot of tissue, so it's going to be a lot harder. What you're going to do is you're going to lock your knee in place, and you're going to try and extend that knee without moving that knee away from where you set it. So you're flexing that leg as hard as you can, and then you're going to bring it back down. So I'm going to show you an example of this not working very well. Danielle has really good strength and joint control, but if we push her to a really close end range, and I say, don't move this knee and extend that foot, her knee is going to shoot forward because it can't actually fire at the same time at that very, very end range. So what you want to do is find that point where you can extend the knee, but the knee does not move away from where you put it into flexion, if that makes sense. So wherever you can go in hip flexion and knee extension at the same time to really get that front side of the leg to fire up, that's where I want you to spend time. You're going to do around 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 second holds. You're welcome to hold it longer or shorter depending on how much it's cramping or how much you're firing up that tissue. Next up, we're going to get into a figure 4 position. If your left leg or your right leg is bent like this and it feels awkward, you're welcome to set the foot down as far on your leg as you want. The leg that you're not working is basically irrelevant. It's just kind of hanging out. So it's not a big deal. It's hard to see Danielle right now, but the foot can basically be hugging anywhere along the inside of the leg that you need it. It's irrelevant to this exercise right now. We're just getting it out of the way. So what Danielle's going to do is she's going to fold forward over that right foot or left foot, doesn't really matter, as far as she can go. Now the goal here is we're not trying to put a huge stretch through her lower back or her hamstrings. We're going to work the front side of the leg. So if this is comfortable for her to sit in, that's great. If it's uncomfortable, we're going to back her out a little bit. Her posture does not matter though. It doesn't matter if she looks like a cat rolled over her leg. None of that matters because right now our focus is going to be on the front side of that hip. So I don't care what she looks like, I care what she feels in this case. So she's going to hold this position. She's going to lean over and she's going to start activating the front side of her right leg by squeezing her quad and trying to pull her foot towards her. So everything on the front side of her leg is now firing. It won't move here because she's closing the angle in her hip. So it's firing up. But what I want her to do is keep that tension in her leg and slowly back off until she can get it about an inch off the ground. So she's going to slowly move, pulling that leg and squeezing it as hard as she can until it gets about an inch. Her whole leg should be lifted off and squeezing hard as she can, and then she's going to relax. This is a passive range hold using the hip flexor and the quad to really fire up at that end range. This might actually get a little crampy, so if you need to step out of it, you're welcome to. But you're going to do a 3 to 5 second hold on each side. 3 to 5 reps on each side should be good. Last but not least, we're going to finish with a split squat. This is a stationary lunge. We're going to work the front side of the leg. We're going to get that knee to extend. We're going to get that hip to flex. So we're going to train that all together. If you have trouble balancing in this position, you're welcome to hold on to someone or something on the sidelines. It doesn't matter. You can hold on to your kid or your husband, wife, sister, brother. It does not matter to me. I just want you to focus on extending the knee and flexing at the hip at the same time. Your balance is irrelevant, so keep yourself locked in whatever way you need to. This front foot is going to stay glued to the floor though. So you might feel a little bit in your calf as you push that knee forward. That's totally fine. Just make sure that you're not rising off that front heel. So Danielle is going to have a lot of forward translation with her body. She's going to push her knee forward and flex at that hip on that front leg as much as possible and then pull herself back up. Notice how her ankle came up a little bit. You're going to try to minimize that as much as you can. So do that again nice and slow, locking that ankle till the knee can't go up any further and then push yourself back out. The big thing is if this hurts your knee, don't push the knee as far forward, you can always come down toward the floor more. Either or, if you have the capacity in your knee and your ankle and your hip to really drive it forward, I want you to try to do that. And if you don't, you can always back out of it. Do 3 to 5 reps on each side, and you're going to go a little slower, but you don't have to pause at the bottom. Just try to get as much out of the knee and the hip as you can as you sink forward, and then come right back up. If you're really advanced, you can always use weights for this. You could do more reps. You could slow down the tempo. You could elevate the back leg. I can stand on Danielle's shoulders. It really doesn't matter. You can do whatever you need to add more load if this is too easy as a body weight exercise. So again, 3 to 5 reps on each side, nice and slow, not so much pausing at the bottom, but not bouncing out of it either.